Hello, everybody. My name's Eric Bolin. I am a counselor who specializes in addiction recovery, specifically sex addiction. So I'm here to be a servant in terms of guiding people through the steps. This is not a replacement for therapy or no, I shouldn't say real step work, but step work with a sponsor. But I felt like it would be good to spend these Monday evenings to just get what little I know about the steps. We are using the AA book. It's a really good text. I would recommend getting one if you haven't one already. I would say that you'd want to make sure you get a real one. Right now it's public domain, and so you end up online maybe getting something that the page numbers don't line up. We want the page numbers to line up. I also recommend the essay book, Sexaholics Anonymous. I'm not speaking for essay, but this also comes in a white format. This book is nice. It'll tell you what the problem looks like for sexual addiction, but it doesn't really tell you how specifically to do the steps as well as I like in this book. So, we're going to be on page 76, and yeah, it's really good to be here. I will share. I was thinking I should share that I'm a little bit under the weather. I'm not. I don't think I have anything major, but I was just not feeling so well today. So if I'm a little bit punk, that's kind of how it is. Let's see here. So. Yeah, steps 8 and 9, it says we made direct amends to the people. Well, actually, I'm going to go to the we made a list. So step 8 is made a list of all the people we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Step 9 made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So I combined these steps together because there's really no sense in spreading them out. But a lot of times we have done step 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 in one sitting. And step 9 is the actual making of amends. There's a lot to read, and so I think maybe I'll just start reading here. I have the ability to add this right to our stream here, which I think is pretty fun. And so we have made step 6, which is became entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And then we have prayed a prayer asking God to remove all these defects of character. And I'm trying to figure out how this works a little bit there. So it says we need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. And if there's anything about 12 steps that's really different about anything else, is its actual action, step work that's involved. This is more of a recipe book where you do the recipe and it works. If you just read it, if you go to meetings and talk about it, if you ponder these things, it doesn't work. If you just think about making a cake and read all about making a cake, you're still not going to have any cake. You actually have to crack eggs and stir and add flour and the essential ingredients. And with patience, you'll end up with a cake. So we have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. Oh. So that's step 4. So you can see that it's really combined there. We subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damages done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self will and run the show ourselves. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol, in this case, lust. So we're often very nervous about this. We just feel like, I don't want to do this. I can't imagine even facing this. But if you go through the steps relatively quickly, the person's still riding the wave of surrender, giving their whole heart, their whole life to God. Then they're looked at all these defects of character, and as any kind of sponsor or helper in this, you just keep them moving on this. That's really key. And probably there are still some misgivings. Of course there are. As we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we have hurt, we may feel diffident about going to some of them on a spiritual basis. Let us be reassured. To some people, we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach. We might prejudice them. At the moment, we are trying to put our lives in order, but this is not an end in itself. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. It is seldom wise to approach an individual who still smarts for more injustice to him and announce that we have gone religious. In the prize ring, this would be called leading with the chin. Why lay ourselves open to being branded fanatics or religious bores? We may kill a future opportunity to carry a beneficial message. But our man is sure to be impressed with a sincere desire to set the right wrong. He is going to be more interested in a demonstration of goodwill rather than our talk of spiritual discoveries. Okay, so what can we get out of that? Like, what are they talking about? It's really different than what we think. We often think that amends is just going and making apologies. It involves that, but it's a spiritual experience to humble ourselves before another human being and share with them that we are, in this case, a sexaholic. And we'll talk about the nuances of that. But in the book, they were an alcoholic. So they would have gone to the person, explained that they had a problem with drinking. And most cases, that actually helps the person, like it explains a lot. For sex addiction, on the other hand, it's a different story. If you go and say, I'm a sexaholic, that's why I did whatever I did, like maybe wasn't honest on paperwork for work or didn't work so well, giving your all because you were busy doing X, Y, and Z at the office. Yeah, so that's how specific it is. We make a list of the people we had harmed. So harms to others could be, I wasn't paying attention to my work. I didn't work as well as I could have. I wasn't the best father I could have been. I wasn't the best husband. And when you connect the dots with how lust affects your real life, then you'll start to see the harms done. Some of the harms seem more obvious, like people who have, and I'm trying to be discreet here because I want to keep this away from things that would trigger people. But pornography involves people that have worked in that industry. Some of them they wanted to, some they didn't. It's more of a slavery situation. Those people were harmed by people looking at them. So how do you make direct amends to them? You probably wouldn't make direct amends. You would make indirect amends. Okay. What comes up is past relationships. Does one go back and say, hey, I'm sorry, but I want to let you know I was a sex addict and I used you? That could cause more harm than good. But on the other hand, it could explain a lot and help that person feel much better moving forward. And in this case, that's why talking about God and talking about how they're there to ask forgiveness and to explain why they did what they did, because they have this bigger disease of alcoholism, or in this case, sexaholism. And then from there, it helps with the mending process. The best amends is continued sobriety. We get sober and stay sober by working the steps and making amends. So it's very intertwined, let's say, to you know. We don't use the excuse for shying away from the subject of God. When it will serve any good purpose, we are willing to announce our conviction with tact and common sense. The question of how to approach the man or the woman we hated will arise. So there are people on our list that we've harmed, but we actually felt like we were harmed by them. Here it talks about that. It says it may be he or they have done us more harm than we have done them. And though we may have acquired a better attitude towards them, we are still not too keen about admitting our faults. Nevertheless, with a person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. It is harder to go to an enemy than to a friend, but we find it much more beneficial to us. We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret. So how is it beneficial to us? Well, it's beneficial in that, you know, like, why do we make amends? And because it's the right thing to do. But there's, a practical reason. And maybe some of you out there know, but yeah, it's good to see some viewers here. The practical reason is that because broken relationships block God's grace. So that's the issue, is that if I have people that I've harmed and I'm working these steps, and I'm never going to apologize, I'm going to hold them in contempt because they wronged me more than I ever wronged them. That's not a place of humility. And without humility, we're not going to gain God's grace. God's grace is freely given, but we receive it through a humble spirit. And in the book of James, it says God gives grace to the humble, but he's opposed to the proud. So are going to people who we have harmed and making amends to them humbling? Yes, it is. That's exactly it. That's why we do it. Not that we don't do it because it's not. It's both. It's the right thing, but it acquires God's grace for us. I love this phrase, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret. So saying, I am so sorry, but I have not treated you with the respect you deserve. I held a grudge against you. I was resentful towards you, and please forgive me. That's so simple. But I will tell you this, every spiritual force will try to get you not to do such a thing. But we'll talk about the benefits if you do that. And seems to go without saying, but they'll put it in here. Under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. Simply, we tell him or them, this was written to the man, by the way, originally. And then there were many women alcoholics, so I apologize for the language. But it says simply we tell him or her or they that we will never get over our drinking until we have done our utmost to straighten out the past. That's interesting. like I'm going to tell the person I am coming to confess and apologize that I'm here because I'll never get over my drinking unless I straighten out my past with you. That seems kind of selfish. I tend not to do that, but sometimes we need to do that. There are people, family members I know, where the mother says, "Why are you talking to me about all this?" And it's like, because I'm an alcoholic, mom, and I'm never really going to get over this unless I straighten out the past. And you could be met with some really craziness, people mad at you, frustrated, but give it time. Usually, in a couple of months, things so change that now they're in a 12-step program. It says we are there to sweep off our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so, never trying to tell them what they should do. His faults are not discussed. We stick to our own. If our manner is calm, frank, and open, we will be gratified with the result. Again, they talk about it like it's a recipe. Really interesting. And those are ingredients: calm. We can be nervous, but we're calm, we're frank, and open. Frankness is kind of the opposite of how we have been. Um, Frankness is just you lay it out there as it is. You don't hide and minimize and justify. We just lay it out there. That, and in this case, one prays a lot about all this, being frank about one's sexual issues. But see, this is any kind of harm. It's not just sexual harm. It could be we might have lied to someone. We might have taken something that wasn't ours. We might have been judgmental, resentful, a number of things. And we'll kind of finish with what to do, like how do you make amends with a spouse or a girlfriend, a boyfriend, or whatever that, yeah, it's a little bit different than what the book will talk about. We'll just plow on through the book here. In 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. Sometimes the person we are calling upon admits his own fault. So feuds of years standing melt away in an hour. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. Our former enemies sometimes praise what we are doing and wish us well. Occasionally, they will offer assistance. It should not matter, however, if someone does throw us out of his office. We have made our demonstration, done our part. It's water over the dam. So that's a section for, and I'd recommend reading this a couple of times and working with your sponsor or coach on this, because we don't delay in doing this, but we just don't do it willy-nilly. Most sexaholics or alcoholics owe money. We do not dodge our creditors. Telling them what we are trying to do, we make no bones about our drinking or lusting. They usually know it anyway, whether we think so or not. We are not afraid of disclosing our alcoholism on the theory it may cause financial harm. Approached in this way, the most ruthless creditor will sometimes surprise us. Arranging the best deal we can, we let these people know we are sorry. Our drinking or using lust has made us slow to pay. We must lose our fear of creditors no matter how far we have to go, for we are liable to drink or lust if we are afraid to face them. By the way, I would say that a lot of sexaholics I know have or had financial issues. It's as if process addictions of food, compulsive overeating, undereating, or binging and purging, sex addiction, and compulsive spending, compulsive under-earning, overspending, or binge and purge with money, all kind of relate. And so, and some sexaholics actually feel worse about their spending addiction. So it just kind of goes back and forth. And I would recommend getting a trusted person who really knows what they're doing to help you through some of those situations. Um, there is hope, and God could take all of these if you link them all together like a bouquet of weeds and lay them at the grave of your addiction and say, I am done with you. God, help me. And God, with God, all things are possible. Um, Perhaps we have committed a criminal offense which might land us in jail if it were known to the authorities. We may be short in our accounts and unable to make good. We have already admitted this in confidence to another person, but we are sure we will be imprisoned or lose our job if it were known. Maybe it's only a petty offense such as padding the expense account. Most of us have done that sort of thing. Okay, so the whole legal thing is a challenge. And again, work with either a trusted therapist or a coach or a sponsor on that and pray about that. I've seen it go either way. I've seen people get honest and they end up going to jail and have really good recovery because they are so willing to go to any length to get sober. Holding these secrets just doesn't work. I've seen it where it goes the other direction, that they could have gone to jail, but no, there was mercy and everything was um, mitigated. I've seen it to where they decided that for the sake of their livelihood, which their family needs, that it was better to take some of these things to their grave. Okay, so what's the right answer? The right answer is to seek God, to follow all the steps, and you will find that you will have a good recovery. It says, although these reparations take innumerable forms, there are some general principles which we find guiding. Reminding ourselves that we've decided to go to any lengths to find a spiritual experience, we ask that we be given strength and direction to do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences may be. We may lose our position or reputation or face jail, but we are willing. We have to be. We must not shrink at anything. So what's interesting here is that we realize that we can't do this in such a way to where we're trying to save ourselves. It doesn't work so well. We have to let go. And yeah, we've already let go of power of things we cannot change. In step 3, we turned our will and our life over to the care of God. If we really believe God is going to restore us to sanity in step 2, then this process should not harm us. And the problem is we so hold on to our own life. I call it spiritual suicide, to put my own life in my own hands rather than letting go and trusting a power greater than myself to restore me to sanity. So we continue on here. Usually, however, other people are involved. Therefore, we are not to be the hasty and foolish martyr who would needlessly sacrifice others to save himself from the alcoholic or sexaholic pit. A man we know had remarried. By the way, I would recommend just reading this just like it's written, and then you'll realize, wow, there's great wisdom here, even for sexaholism, even though this was originally written to alcoholics, okay? A man we know had remarried. Because of resentment and drinking, he had not paid alimony to his first wife. And you can see the signs of the times, this was the 1940s. She was furious. She went to court and got an order for his arrest. He had commenced our way of life. You'll hear that phrase, our way of life, meaning trying to practice these principles in everything. Had secured a position and was getting his head above water. It would have been impressive heroics if he had walked up to the judge and said, "Here I am." We thought he ought to be willing to do that if necessary, but if he were in jail, he could provide nothing for his entire family. We suggested he write his first wife admitting his faults and asking for forgiveness. He did, and also sent a small amount of money. He told her what he would try to do in the future. He said he was perfectly willing to go to jail if she insisted. Of course, she did not, and the whole situation has long since been adjusted. You'll see things like that where there's no more tug of war, you're surrendering, you're just trying to mend the relationship. I put a lot of emphasis on the word mending. Before taking drastic action, we might implicate other people. We secure with we secure their consent. Oh, before taking drastic action, we might implicate other people. We secure their consent. If we have obtained permission, have consulted with others, asked God to help, and the drastic step is indicated, we must not shrink. So what's interesting is that with sex addiction, it's different than alcoholism because one may be acting out with other people. So that would harm those other people. Like, is it wise to go back to a prostitute? Probably not. Indirect amends would be appropriate. There's 4 types of amends. There's direct. That's eyeball to eyeball, going to the person in person. I do believe it's really a good way to go. There's never a reason to really do indirect amends if direct amends can be done. This is not about, oh, you can send a letter if you want. No, it's really best because you're mending the relationship. So obviously texting and email seem out of the question. Although I made one amends through an email, it was because I didn't have their home address and it was 20 years. I don't recommend waiting 20 years, but that's how it went down. So I did get their address to be able to send them a check. So that's how that went. Indirect is when you can't do it direct. So letters, a phone call, maybe giving a gift or gift card or something in the mail, and you could do it anonymously. Amends in kind, meaning doing it in proxy. So say like you had a loved one who you mistreated, they passed away. How are you going to make amends? Well, you make indirect amends, maybe at their grave. You might pray a prayer for them, do something spiritual, I'll say, to help them wherever they may be in the other side. There are people that, let's put it this way, and this sounds tough, but depending on one's spiritual, relationship with God or religion or faith tradition, acting out sexually with people could be leading them down to hell. Boy, that sounds tough to say, but I do think that can be the case. We certainly have to make amends for them, and indirect amends may be praying for them every single night. It may be a simple prayer that suggests we pray for the people we have harmed. Have mercy on them, help mitigate, the effects of my interaction with them. Indirect amends could be, like I said, maybe a gift card from Starbucks, because you could be upset with someone, and this could happen in step 10 and 11. We'll talk about that it's a current kind of thing. Amends in kind. Say like you, this is what I was getting obscure. like your son dies, so then you have another son. Yeah, no. This one's easy. If you've mistreated past girlfriends, and some of them you might need to do a direct amends, some indirect, like we mentioned, but treating your current girlfriend or spouse with the utmost respect is doing an amends by not mistreating anybody else, but you treat them with kindness, with patience, with love. It's not just about not acting out on them or lying to them. It's about actually treating them in a 12-step way, which means love and patience, tolerance, kindness, continued growth. Which brings us to the last kind of amends, which is called living amends. This is this idea that if you live your life following God in the 12 steps, that is the best amends there is. It really is. Um, so, so, um, yeah, this one's good. It's an interesting story. It says, this brings to mind a story about one of our friends. While drinking, he accepted a sum of money from a bitterly hated business rival, giving him no receipt for it. He subsequently denied having received the money and used the incident as a basis for discrediting. Thus, he used his own wrongdoing as a means of destroying the reputation of another. In fact, his rival was ruined. He felt that he had done a wrong he could not possibly make right. If he opened the old affair, he was afraid it would destroy the reputation of his partner, disgrace his family, and take away his means of livelihood. What right had he to involve those dependent upon him? How could he possibly make a public statement exonerating his rival? After consulting with his wife and partner, he came to the conclusion that it was better to take those risks than to stand before his creator guilty of such ruinous slander. He saw that he had to place the outcome in God's hands, or he would soon start drinking again, and all would be lost anyhow. He attended church for the first time in many years. After the sermon, he quietly got up and made an explanation. His action met widespread approval, and today he is one of the most trusted citizens of his town. This all happened years ago. I like that story because it really shows you that if you follow God in this process, a perfect will, it will all work out. Okay. The chances are that we have domestic troubles. Perhaps we are mixed up with women in a fashion we wouldn't care to have advertised. We doubt if, in this respect, alcoholics are fundamentally much worse than other people. But drinking does complicate sex relations in the home. After a few years with an alcoholic, a wife gets worn out, resentful, and uncommunicative. How could she be anything else? By the way, I would say it's much worse when you're in a marriage or a relationship where you're using sex as a drug, or pornography or masturbation or whatever. And usually there's a lot of denial that people really don't think that there's any harm there. Almost every couple of months I run into someone where I take a nice deep breath and go, this is, yeah. I've heard men say, I can't trust my wife, she betrayed me. And I have to point out to them that maybe they are the ones who betrayed them, and they go, yikes. I've heard men point out how their wives aren't a nice, tidy, um, what is it, housekeeper, or not taking care of themselves, all kinds of crazy stuff. And then when I point out just gently, well, all I have to do is ask, well, what did you do the last couple of years? And then I say, well, let's compare these things. And they're just often so distorted. So when you do amends with a loved one, you have to realize that it's so much more than just acting out. It is this real sickness of selfishness that affects the relationship. And we just think that it's, you know, so the man feels sorry for himself. He commences to look around nightclubs, perhaps, etc. He finds the girl who understands. Well, any addiction is going to come to you and say, I understand, whether it be drinking or spending or food. Food understands. It's there 24/7 if you live in a rich country. Um, in fairness, we must say that she may understand, but what are we going to do about a thing like that? A man so involved often feels very remorseful at times, especially if he is married to a loyal and courageous girl who has literally gone through hell for him. Whatever the situation, we usually have to do something about it. If we are sure our wife does not know, should we tell her? Now, this is AA talking, and it says, not always, we think. If she knows in a general way that we have been wild, should we tell her in detail? Undoubtedly, we should admit our fault. We must insist on knowing, she may insist on knowing all the particulars. She will want to know who the woman is and where she is. We feel we ought to say to her that we have no right to involve another person. We are sorry for what we have done, and God willing, it should not be repeated. More than that, we cannot do. More than that, we cannot do. Oh, yeah, more than that, we cannot do. We have no right to go further. Though there may be justifiable exceptions, and though we wish to lay down no rule of any sort, we have often found that this is the best course to take. So the delicate situation here of marital infidelity, I do believe that for any partner's sake, it's important to know, did a person sleep with someone who could have transmitted a disease? To not tell them about that just is not really fair, even wise. It's just not honest. And I've seen many people just not get sober for years just because they won't be honest. And the way they say it is, oh, I don't want to harm my wife. If I told my wife everything, the problem is, this sounds tough, but I believe this through my experiences, that they say, well, if she learned this, she would be harmed. It's like, well, when you did this, you harmed her. By not telling her, you may be harming her more. Now, if she's the type of person who wants to just know, are you in recovery, but she doesn't want to know the details, then you don't push the details on her. If she is a person who wants to know every detail, you'd have to ask, is this really going to harm her and harm the relationship? I would get a trusted therapist to sort that out. A live stream. I think the principle is search for God's answer in that, but every case is different. And I think that step 8 and 9 is a delicate step, but it needs to be done. And it needs to be done in a way that's not going to create harm to others. In Alcoholics Anonymous, the book gives some really good information. And it's amazingly kind of helpful, even though it's not talking about sex addiction per se. Again, you can see the detail here. It tells us, generally speaking, maybe they wouldn't say anything specific about other people, but there may be justifiable exceptions. And though we do not wish to lay no rule of any sort, we often found this the best course to take. So it's really wisely worded. Our design for living is not a one-way street. It is good for the wife as for the husband. If we can forget, so can she. I need time to ponder that. I'm not sure exactly. Is it better? Well, I think both people in an addictive relationship need help, I really do highly recommend S-Anon for the spouses of sexaholics. It helps you go through the same exact process, just from the other side. And there's lots of good audios about how to recover online. Go to S-Anon, look it up. It's really good. It is better, however, that one does not needlessly name a person upon whom she can vent jealousy. Perhaps there are some cases where the utmost frankness is demanded. No outsider can appraise such an intimate situation. It may be that both will decide that the way of good sense and loving kindness is to let bygones be bygones. Each might pray about it, having the other's one's happiness utmost in mind. Keep it always in sight that we are dealing with that most terrible human emotion, jealousy. Good generalship may decide that the problem be attacked on the flank rather than risk a face-to-face combat. Yeah, I love this. Is interesting. This is one of the famous phrases. The alcoholic is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken. Sweet relationships are dead. Affections have been uprooted. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. We feel a man is unthinking when he says that sobriety is enough. He is like the farmer who came out of his cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. To his wife, he remarked, "Don't see anything the matter here, Ma. Ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing?" That is so like addiction and sexaholism, and that we just don't realize what we have done to destroy things, and the addiction destroyed us with it. Yeah, and that's why you don't want to delay this, but you want to be thorough. I do believe another principle is be thorough in terms of writing out a 9-step amends. Isn't a bad idea. Again, when it comes to the actual dealing with sexual behavior and stuff like that. The other stuff, like you took something that didn't belong to you or you lied or something, all that is kind of a little bit more simpler, but this is kind of complex. What about children? I think it's best to pray about that for sure. And what I mean by children is any addict of any sort realizes that they could have been a better father, a better mother, and that by not being sober, the family got the brunt of their crazy behavior, their mood swings, their grumpiness, and unfortunately can pass things on to family members by those 3 rules: the don't talk, don't feel, don't trust rules. So what do? Well, living amends for sure. I also feel like if family members were really struggling with diabetes and the parents have diabetes but are unwilling to share that they have it, but seeing blood sugars go crazy, I think that's not love. It's wise to be humbling and to say, look, I have this disease too, and I am so sorry that I passed it on to you, versus just let people suffer in silence. And some amends will come to you a little bit later. And that's where steps 10 and 11 we'll talk about, is that you continue to do this inventory, and when they come up maybe 2 years into sobriety, this initial step, you're sober, but to stay sober, you have to clean as you go. I love this. Yes, there is a long period of reconstruction ahead. We must take the lead. A remorseful mumbling that we are sorry won't fill the bill at all. We ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyze the past as we now see it, being very careful not to criticize them. Their defects may be glaring, but the chances are that our own actions are partly responsible. So we clean house with the family, asking each morning in meditation, that's steps 10 and 11, that our Creator, or God, show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. Unless one's family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought not to urge them. We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters. They will change in time. Our behavior will convince them more than our words. We must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness or lusting would make a skeptic out of anyone. There may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves that we would right them if we could. This is important because a lot of people have such horrible shame and remorse. They go, how on earth can I even begin to help fix this? I can't undo this. And it says, if we're going to follow the steps, we do not worry about them. Okay? We focus on that we would write them if we could. And I've talked to people, and people have talked to me, and they go, would you write it if you could? Well, of course I would. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. And there may be a valid reason for postponement in some cases, but we don't delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. So, yeah, I do think that we don't want to err on the side of being arrogant, and I think servile and scraping is just overboard. But I think we can be humble and we can be remorseful. But I like these principles: sensible, tactful, considerate, considering everybody's feelings, and humble without being servile and scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. I'll add by His grace. We don't crawl before anyone. If we are, now this is the famous promises of any 12-step group that are read. It says, if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going, and by the way, there's 12 of these, by the way. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not, they all say in a meeting. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. Okay? That's powerful. And for years, many people think, oh, this is just what the 12 steps are. You know, this is they go, oh, this relates to all the steps. Actually, no. Those 12 promises relate to halfway through your 9-step amends. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. All that will be changed. Of course, working all the steps, it applies. So yeah. So any questions on 9th step? It's good to see these people here. Yeah, well, our next time we'll be talking about steps 10 and 11. And just for clarification, yes, we have 2 YouTube channels. We actually have more, but we'll keep it simple. There's Eric Bolin MA. That is for any kind of addiction. It's best just to go look for Eric Bolin addiction, and then sexual recovery is the other one. And just they're just separated. And why? Well, because I started the sexual recovery 1 years ago, and we have like 2,400 subscribers. On the Eric Bolin MA, we have maybe 100, maybe if that, maybe lower. But we felt the need to have one for one issue and then one for everything else. So we're going to share the same thing tomorrow night. It's just going to be geared towards any addiction. Stop by Grace said they just ordered his AA and SAA book. Just for clarification, Sexaholics Anonymous is SA. Sex Addicts Anonymous is SAA. And SLAA is Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. They all have 3 different books. The book we're using is much more conservative. I'm not trying to put down any other book, but this white book is SA program talks about no sex with self or anybody else except in a marriage. SAA, Sex Addicts Anonymous, has a green book, and it's described as you make up your own definition of sobriety. And so you can only imagine maybe some of the problems with that, not trying to put them down, but you could say, well, I don't want sex with prostitutes, but as long as I don't do that, I'm okay masturbating and looking at porn. And we go, yeah, I just don't, as a professional, I don't see a lot of recovery there. So that's why I recommend what I recommend. But anyway, it's good to see you guys. We shall see you next week. Good. Yeah, that's good that you got the white book there. For more information, you can click and subscribe, click notification, and that's easy for you to know when we're doing live streams. I apologize for not being more advertising. Like, I maybe should just post next week's one now. That would be, but I've just been so busy. That's how it goes. And then you can visit our website. There's the website ericbolin.net. That's the main website, or sexualrecovery.net. So, well, I wish you all well. You take care and have a great evening. Bye-bye.